Namaskar. Welcome to RIG History Extended. Today we step into a story older than empires and deeper than any mine. The story of India's Golden Saga. For thousands of years, this land has shimmered with the glow of gold, not just in ornaments and crowns, but in spirit, culture, and destiny. When the world looked to the east, it saw a golden bird, radiant and self sufficient, where merchants, kings, and mystics alike found fortune and faith. But gold in India was never only wealth, it was purity, power, and promise, a metal that became a mirror of civilization itself. In this journey, we will trace how gold flowed into India through ancient trade, how empires were built and broken over it, how it left the country in ships and returned in faith, and how, even today, in vaults, temples, and hearts, gold continues to define India's place in the world. It is not just economic, it is emotion, not just a metal, but a living thread that runs through 5,000 years of Indian history. Let us begin the voyage as we follow the Golden River from Harappa's workshops to the reserve bank of India's vaults, from the ancient oceans to the future of a resurgent nation. Before gold became a currency, it was a symbol of divine, of creation, of truth. In the hymns of Rig Veda, gold or Hiranya is the metal of immortality. It gleams in the crown of Surya, the sun god, and in the breastplates of kings who claimed divine right. For India, gold was not discovered, it was revealed. It was woven into philosophy and poetry long before it entered treasuries. The word Hiranyagarbha, the golden womb, described the birth of the universe itself. Thus, gold was life's first metaphor, not merely its measure. Ancient artisans, long before written history, shaped this light of the earth into beads, bangles, and amulets. They believed gold carried not just beauty but blessing, protection against evil and decay. When kings donated gold to temples, it wasn't wealth they gave away, it was virtue, transformed into metal. This sanctity explains why, even today, from a tribal village wedding to a metropolitan festival, gold is touched to the forehead, offered to gods, and treasured as a part of family soul. In India, gold has always been faith made tangible. Long before the word India was spoken, the cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro glittered quietly under the Indus sun. Archaeologists have found gold ornaments buried with their dead, rings, necklaces, and diadems so delicately crafted that even modern tools can barely replicate them. These were not mere decorations. They tell us that for more than 4,000 years ago, Indians were already mastered in goldsmithing, alloying, and fine metalwork. Gold dust, washing pans, and crucibles unearthed in these sites show that Harappans sourced golds from rivers like the Indus and traded it across distant lands. The gold that flowed through Harappa's markets connected India with Mesopotamia and Persia. Cylinder seals found in both regions hint at a network of trade, of spices, beads, and precious metals. The metal's presence in burial sites proves that it was part of both commerce and ritual, a bridge between life and afterlife. From these ancient workshops began India's unbroken conversation with gold. The civilization may have fallen, but its art survived, reborn in every dynasty that followed. Harappa's gold was not lost in time. It became the seed of a tradition that would outlast empires. As the Vedic age dawned, gold became the language of both religion and royalty. Kings performed grand sacrifices called Ashwamedha and Rajasuya, offering gold to priests as tokens of universal rule. To possess gold was not greed, it was legitimacy. The Vedas spoke of gold as imperishable, untouched by fire or water, just as the soul is untouched by death. The Upanishads used gold to explain metaphysics, just as ornaments differ in form but remain one in substance. All beings arise from the same divine source. In the courts of early kingdoms, gold coins began to appear, small hand stamped pieces exchanged in trade. The metal linked the sacred with the practical, the temple with the market. By the time of the Mahajanapadas, gold symbolized both power and purity, owned by priests in rituals and carried by merchants across rivers. Gold thus became India's mortal metal, earned through dharma, spent for duty, and stored for destiny. It was the sun made solid, circulating through the veins of civilization. As centuries passed, India's mastery of crafts, textiles, and spices drew traders from faraway shores. By the first millennium BC, ships from Arabia, Egypt, and Greece sailed the Indian Ocean, following the monsoon winds. They came seeking pearls, silk, and paper. But most of all, they came carrying gold. India, abundant in goods but scarce in gold mines, imported vast quantities of bullion. This was how the balance of world's wealth tilted eastward. According to ancient accounts, the trade through the Red Sea and the Arabian ports was so immense that Roman writers fretted over their empty treasuries. Indian ports like Baruch, Muziris, and Arikamedu became global crossroads. Gold coins from Augustus to Nero have been found buried in these regions, testifying to centuries of Indo-Roman exchange. Every silk garment, every sack of paper, every carved ivory piece sent westwards pulled back a river of gold eastwards. It was in this era that India became the world's largest reservoir of gold, a reputation it would keep for nearly 2000 years. The world's empires might rise and fall, but the flow of gold into India never ceased. By the dawn of Common Era, the wealth of ancient world was moving east. The markets of Alexandria and Carthage echoed with one refrain: India drains Rome of gold. According to Pliny the Elder, in 1st century CE, nearly 50 million sesterces of Roman gold left the empire every year to pay for Indian luxuries. Roman ladies demanded Indian silk, nobles preferred Indian paper, and emperors prized Indian ivory and gems. The merchants of Red Sea sailed with amphorae of wine and returned with spices and fine cotton. Their ships weighed down by gold coins stamped the faces of Caesars. Archaeologists have unearthed thousands of these coins in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Maharashtra. Indian rulers did not hoard them idly. They melted and reminted them into local currency. Thus, Roman gold was reborn as Indian wealth. Historians note that this eastward tide was so great that Rome's economy suffered chronic bullion shortages, yet India's coffers overflowed, and its artisans turned the foreign metal into symbols of faith, ornaments for gods, and dowries for daughters. The legend of Sone ki Chiriya, the golden bird, took flight here. When the world's richest empire bowed to India's trade, gold became the language of admiration and envy alike. As the Mauryan Empire united the subcontinent, gold became a tool of governance. Chandragupta Maurya filled the royal treasury with taxes and tributes from distant provinces, while Kautilya's Arthashastra detailed how gold should be mined, tested, and minted. It was a manual of empire built on fiscal discipline and moral duty. Under Ashoka the Great, gold transformed from a symbol of conquest into means of compassion. His inscriptions speak of donations to monasteries, hospitals, and welfare centers. The emperor who once wielded the sword now spread the light of Dhamma. The gold funded that transformation. Trade flourished across Asia. Mauryan merchants reached Bactria, Sri Lanka, and Southeast Asia, exchanging textiles, spices for bullion. Archaeological finds in Taxila reveal workshops where goldsmiths engraved intricate ornaments destined for both palace and shrine. According to economic historians, the Mauryan period set a precedent: state control over gold reserves and private devotion through donation. It was a balance of power and piety that future dynasties would emulate. When the empire eventually declined, it left behind not just pillars of stone but a fiscal system where gold was both the blood and the treasury and the soul of generosity. Centuries later, India entered another radiance, the Gupta Age, 4th to 6th century CE, often called the Golden Age of India. The emperors Chandragupta I, Samudragupta, and Chandragupta Vikramaditya issued exquisite gold dinaras that remain among the finest coins ever struck. Each coin carried poetry in metal, the king playing the veena, slaying a lion, or performing the Ashwamedha. These images proclaimed both divine favor and earthly prosperity. The purity of the dinaras, often above 95% gold, signaled immense inflows of bullion, much of it from foreign trade. Gupta India exported silk, steel, and knowledge, importing gold from the Roman Empire and Central Asia. Temples and guilds stored vast reserves. Scholars and poets received gold as patronage. According to numismaticists, the gold in Gupta currency system became the model for centuries to come, linking artistry with economy. Foreign travelers described India as a realm where gold flowed like a river. Science, literature, and architecture blossomed under its gleam. When we speak today of India's ancient genius, it is this era when wealth and wisdom walked hand in hand that shines the brightest. After the Guptas, regional kingdoms rose, and with them came a flowing of flowering temple culture. Stone sanctuaries from Tanjavur to Puri were clad in gold leaf, their sanctums glowing like the sun. Kings believed gifting gold to the divine ensured both merit and memory. The Cholas, Pallavas, and Pandyas turned temple cities into financial hubs. Inscriptions record donations measured in kalanju of gold, used to fund schools, hospitals, and public works. Temples became banks before banks existed, accepting deposits, lending grain, financing trade caravans. Pilgrims offered ornaments and the monarchs gifted crowns. Over generations, these offerings accumulated into immense treasuries. Tirupati, Padmanabhaswamy, and countless others became not only spiritual centers but economic ones. According to historians of religion and finance, this intertwining of faith and finance made India's economy remarkably resilient. Gold was circulating sanctity, flowing from the people to the gods and back to the people through charity. It embodied the Indian idea that wealth, when concentrated, ceases to corrupt and begins to uplift. But where there is wealth, there is temptation. In the 11th century, the fame of India's golden temples reached the cold courts of Ghazni. Mahmud of Ghazni, hearing of treasures beyond imagination, invaded the subcontinent 17 times. His most infamous raid struck Somnath in 1025 CE, where he looted idols plated in gold and carried back caravan loads of coins and ornaments. Chroniclers from both sides record the shock. For the invaders, it was triumph. For India, it was tragedy. The first of many wounds opened by greed. Yet, even such plunder could not extinguish India's prosperity. Trade routes reopened, artisans rebuilt, temples rose again. Later conquerors followed the same lure. Muhammad Ghori, the Delhi Sultans, and the regional warlords. Gold moved as tribute, ransom, or tax, but it never left India's imagination. It remained the standard of power and the ornament of faith. According to modern historians, these raids revealed not weakness but abundance, a land so wealthy that even after repeated invasions it could recover within decades. The glitter that drew swords also fueled resilience. In the Indian spirit, gold was not a possession to be lost, it was a light that could always be rekindled. When the Mughals rose to power in the 16th century, India entered another epoch of golden grandeur. Under Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan, trade and art reached new heights, and the gold once again became the emblem of imperial might. The empire's mints struck the celebrated gold mohr, often of 22-carat purity, which, according to economic historians such as Irfan Habib, reflected the steady inflow of bullion from foreign trade. European travelers like Ralph Fitch and Niccolo Manucci marveled at the abundance of gold and silver in Indian markets, noting that 4/5 of all Mughal imports were bullion. These metals came from New World via Europe, exchanged for India's fine cottons, indigo, and spices. The Mughal treasury was a wonder of the age. Palaces shone with gilded domes, and the emperor's throne itself glittered with thousands of jewels. Gold had not become only currency but spectacle, an assertion of divine kingship. As Abul Fazl recorded in Aini Akbari, gold and silver coins bore the emperor's name alongside the words Allahu Akbar, proclaiming both earthly and spiritual sovereignty. The Mughals transformed India into the financial heart of Asia, a land where the world's gold converged and where prosperity and artistry fused under the golden sun. But the same glitter that drew admiration also drew envy. In 1739, the Persian ruler Nadir Shah crossed the mountains into Mughal India, lured by tales of Delhi's unimaginable wealth. Contemporary Persian chronicles describe how, after a brutal sack of the city, he seized treasures worth nearly 70 crore, including the legendary Peacock Throne and the Kohinoor diamond. According to Tariq Nadiri, the loot was so vast that it took 700 elephants, 4,000 camels, and 12,000 horses to carry it back to Persia. European observers compared the event to the fall of Rome, an empire stripped of its gold overnight. The historian William Dalrymple calls this moment a geopolitical earthquake, for the outflow of bullion crippled the Mughal economy and weakened the empire's currency for decades. Yet, even after this devastation, trade continued, artisans rebuilt, and temples filled their coffers again. The loss of gold did not end India's wealth, it only proved how deep that reservoir ran. When Nadir Shah vanished into history, he carried away India's treasure, but he could not still the spirit of renewal that always followed ruin on this land. Barely a century later, a new power arrived, the British East India Company, and behind it, the full machinery of the British Empire. What began as trade soon became rule, and the story of gold took a darker turn, the Great Drain. After the Battle of Plassey in 1757, the company seized the treasury of Nawab Siraj ud Dowla, initiating the systematic transfer of wealth from Bengal to London. As explained by Dadabhai Nauroji in his famous drain theory, India's wealth was now being siphoned off not by raids but by revenue. Gold and silver once poured into India through trade. Now they flowed outward to pay for British wars and industrial imports. The company minted rupees backed by reserves in London, turning India's monetary base into a colonial appendage. The story stretched across centuries. By the early 1800s, British officials used India's golds to settle deficits within the empire itself. Even Sir Isaac Newton, when serving as Master of Royal Mint, had earlier noted that gold was cheaper in India, a fact Britain exploited to bolster its own reserves. Thus, the British did not bring gold to India, they carried it away. The golden bird was caged, and its song grew faint. Yet the metal never lost its glow in the hearts of the people. Under the British Raj, India's gold entered a new cycle of exploitation and irony. When Britain moved into a gold exchange standard in the early 20th century, the rupee was pegged indirectly to gold through the pound sterling, meaning that India's gold effectively sat in London's vaults. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, the price of gold in London soared after Britain abandoned the gold standard in 1931. This created a curious imbalance. Gold was worth more abroad than in India. As documented by the World's Gold Council's historical review, millions of Indians sold their jewelry and coins. This gold was exported to England to stabilize British banks. Economist Angus Madison later wrote that over 250 million pound worth of gold left India between 1931 and 1938, wealth liquidated by Indian families but used to rescue the British economy. A nation's saving became an empire's lifeline. Even as the Raj spoke of civilization and progress, Indian peasants were melting their heirlooms to survive drought and debt. Their gold shipped across oceans to balance imperial ledgers. By the time of independence, India still glittered in memory, but its coffers had been hallowed by centuries of colonial arithmetic. 1947. The British flag came down and India awake to freedom, but not to prosperity. The treasury was depleted, industries weak, and reserves thin. Gold, the old companion of India's fortunes, now became both a blessing and a burden. According to Reserve Bank of India's early annual reports, gold was priced around rupees 88 per 10 grams at the time of independence. The new government, led by Jawaharlal Nehru, viewed gold imports as a threat to scarce foreign exchange. Import licenses were restricted and private ownership began to be monitored. For ordinary Indians, however, gold remained the currency of trust. In a time of partition, migration, and uncertainty, families carried gold bangles and coins across borders, portable security when paper money meant little. Through the 1950s, as India built dams and factories, it also built an informal gold economy. The government feared that every imported ounce drained precious dollars, but people believed that every gram stored was safety for their children. This quiet tug of war between economic planning and emotional tradition would shape the next half century of policy. Gold was no longer the king's treasure, it was now the people's treasury, hidden in millions of homes, waiting for the next chapter of destiny. The decades after freedom tested India's resolve. The wars of 1962, 1965, and 1971 strained the exchequer, while global tremors rattled currencies. During the Indo-China War of 1962, newspapers recorded a rush to gold shops as citizens sought safety in the metal that had protected their ancestors through famine and empire alike. In 1971, when President Nixon ended the Bretton Woods dollar gold link, the fixed price of US $35 per ounce vanished. According to IIFL Finance Historical Price Series, Indian rates shot up from around rupees 176 per 10 gram in the 1960s to nearly rupees 937 per 10 gram in the 1970s. Oil shocks and global inflation fanned the fire. The government imposed the Gold Control Act of 1968, banning private bars and coins. Yet smugglers thrived from Dubai to Bombay. Songs, films, and folklore began to mention foreign gold. India's relationship with the metal had turned underground, but never cold. Economists later observed that despite all restrictions, household demand hardly fell. Gold had become the people's currency of confidence, shining in dowries and temple vaults, even as paper rupees lost value. Each rise in price told a larger story, the struggle of a young nation balancing dreams of development with the ancient instinct to hold something eternal in its hands. By 1991, 4 decades of deficits had pushed India to the brink. Foreign reserves could barely pay for 3 weeks of imports. The world doubted the Indian rupee, credit lines froze. Then came the movement that still echoes in economic memory. According to Reserve Bank of India and the Finance Ministry archives, the government secretly pledged 67 tons of gold, 47 tons flown to the Bank of England and 20 tons to the Union Bank of Switzerland to raise 2.2 billion US dollars in emergency loans arranged by the IMF. Newspapers of July 1991 described night flights carrying crates marked only cargo. For a nation that once fed world's appetite for bullion, the sight of its own gold leaving home was heartbreak. Yet, as Finance Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh later said in Parliament, no nation's pride is greater than its survival. That pledge brought time, and history turned. Within months, India opened its markets, dismantled controls, and began the journey of liberalization. The very metal that symbolized loss became the key to renewal. When the gold returned a year later, it glowed with new meaning, a reminder of faith like gold regains its luster after fire. The reforms of the 1990s changed everything. Import restrictions eased, duties replaced prohibitions. The 1992 new economic policy allowed the NRIs to bring gold legally, and soon official imports soared. Smuggling networks shrank, bullion dealers registered, and India's centuries old passion stepped into the sunlight. According to World Gold Council, annual Indian demand averaged 700 to 800 tons through the 1990s. At the same time, world prices fluctuated between US dollar 350 to 450 per ounce, giving middle class families a chance to accumulate. Jewelry exports flourished from Surat, Mumbai, and Chennai, linking artisans to global markets once again. The government introduced gold deposit schemes and gold bonds, trying to mobilize private holdings for development. While participation remained limited, these experiments marked the birth of India's former gold market. By the turn of the millennium, the liberalization deepening, the narrative had flipped. Gold was no longer contraband, but commerce, no longer rebellion, but respectability. Families could buy it freely, investors could trade it transparently. What had once been pledged in despair was now traded in confidence. The reforms did not change India's love for gold, they legitimized it. As economists later observed, the 1991 crisis purified both policy and perception, transforming a symbol of anxiety to a pillar of economic freedom. The new century began with hope and uncertainty. The dot-com crash in 2000, global recession in 2008, and COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 each reminded the world of gold's timeless refuge. Between 2000 and 2011, global prices surged from about US dollar 270 to US dollar 1900 per ounce. In India, according to Financial Express data, the 10-gram prices jumped from rupees 4400 in 2001 to over 29,000 by 2011 and crossed rupees 50,000 during the pandemic. Each crisis abroad ignited faith at home. The World Gold Council estimated India's annual consumption near 800 to 900 tons, rival only by China. Gold loans, ETFs, and digital platforms multiplied. At the same time, RBI records show official holdings climbing steadily from about 400 tons in 1990 to 558 tons after the IMF purchase of 2009 and reaching 880 tons by 2025. Every ounce told a story. The confidence of savers, the caution of policymakers, the quiet continuity of tradition. Even as the rupee fluctuated, the yellow metal anchored belief. Financial journalists call the gold the Indian insurance policy. When the world panicked, India polished its bangles. The same glow that once lit the crowns of emperors now shimmered in the walls of banks and the apps of a new generation, binding the past and the present in a single gleam. Behind every macro number lies a personal story. The World Gold Council's India Gold Market Series 2022 estimates that Indian households hold around 25,000 tons of gold, worth more than US dollar 1.5 trillion or 6 times the hoard of Fort Knox. This is not speculative wealth, it is emotional security. Gold is given at a daughter's wedding, pledged for a farmer's loan, donated at a temple, or hidden for the future. Anthropologists describe it as the social metal linking families across generations. Temples such as Tirupati and Padmanabhaswamy guard treasures whose value defies imagination. The faith that feeds those offerings also sustains the bullion trade. Even during recessions, rural households buy small coins on Akshaya Tithya, believing that the day ensures endless prosperity. Economists call it dead capital, yet for millions it is living faith. Attempts to mobilize it through the Gold Monetization Scheme 2015 gathered only a few dozen tons, for sentiment outweighed spreadsheets. Still, this vast private reserve acts as India's silent bank. When drought strikes, gold is born. When harvest returns, it is redeemed. No policy planner designed this cycle. It evolved from centuries of resilience. The world measures gold in carats, India measures it in trust. If households are India's private bank, the Reserve Bank of India is its public vault. After pledging 67 tons in 1991, the RBI began buying again, quietly but steadily. According to official RBI bulletins and the World Gold Council, India purchased 200 tons of gold from the IMF in 2009, a symbolic act of reversal. The debtor of yesterday became the custodian of today. Through the next decade, the RBI kept adding. By 2025, holdings crossed 880 tons, forming roughly 14% of total reserves. Financial dailies reported that much of this gold was repatriated from the London vaults back to Indian soil. An assertion of sovereignty echoed across emerging economies. Central bankers explained that gold offered insurance against extreme shocks. It carried no counterparty risk, no sanctions risk, and moved when paper assets froze. Analysts such as Somasundaram PR of the WGC noted that this accumulation aligned with global trend of de-dollarization, where nations diversified away from US treasuries. Thus, RBI's vaults glimmer not only with metal but with meaning. Every bar stacked in Mumbai or Nagpur whispers of regained control, proof that India's reserves, once mortgaged in crisis, now stand as collateral of confidence. Policy too began to evolve with their times. For decades, high import duties had fueled smuggling. According to the Union Budget of 2024, the basic customs duty on gold was cut from 15% to 6%, the lowest in a decade. The Finance Ministry's explanatory note stated that legal imports rose by nearly 50 tons within months while illicit inflows fell. Alongside this fiscal realism came digital innovation. Gold exchange traded funds (ETFs), first launched in 2007, expanded sharply. AMFI data 2025 recorded inflows of over $2.2 billion, pushing total holdings past 77 tons. Fintech platforms offered micro investments called digital gold, while sovereign gold bonds let citizens earn interest on metal they never physically touched. These reforms did not weaken tradition, they modernized it. The village goldsmith and the online broker now served the same instinct. As RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das remarked in 2025, gold is part of India's macro prudential DNA. For the first time, the government, the markets, and the people began to move in harmony, turning an age old business obsession into an organized, transparent asset class that bridges the bazaars and the Bloomberg screen alike. While India refined its domestic policy, the world itself was shifting. After 2022, when Western sanctions froze Russia's dollar reserves, central banks from Asia to the Middle East accelerated their move toward gold. The World Gold Council's 2024 survey found that 95% of central bankers expected to raise gold holdings in coming years. In this realignment, the BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, emerged as a key force. Policy papers discussed creating a BRICS settlement currency partially anchored to gold or commodities. Though still conceptual, it triggered a race among the members to enlarge bullion reserves. According to Reuters Commodities Desk, May 2025, India's repatriation of 64 tons and continued monthly purchases signaled commitment to that idea. The People's Bank of China and the Bank of Russia made similar moves, pushing official global demand beyond 1,000 tons annually. Analyst Jeffrey Curry of Goldman Sachs called this the silent monetization of gold. Currencies may compete, but trust now glimmers in metal. For India, this trend vindicates the ancient wisdom. What once made merchants sail to her shores is again what anchors her role in global finance. The world is turning east, and gold is the compass. Looking toward 2035, experts foresee another golden horizon. The HSBC Metals Research projects gold near US $3,600 per ounce within 5 years. Goldman Sachs places an upper band around US $5,000, while market veteran Ed Yardeni imagines $10,000 in prolonged inflation cycle. Behind these numbers lie forces that economists can measure but not control: persistent inflation, elevated debt, energy transitions, and geopolitical uncertainty. According to LBMA forecasts, when real interest rates fall, gold tends to surge, a rule history rarely breaks. For India, each global tremor converts into domestic opportunity. Higher prices raise the value of RBI reserves and household savings. Even if import bills rise, Deloitte India's 2025 outlook argues that 1% revaluation in gold adds nearly $4 billion to national wealth. By 2035, analysts expect the metal to account for nearly one-fifth of India's official reserves, while tokenized and blockchain tracked gold could dominate retail investment. The spiritual metal of the Vedas is thus entering the digital vaults of the future. Yet its essence remains unchanged. Gold is still trust made tangible, the proof that value can outlive empires and algorithms alike. Standing in 2025, India's golden future glows with paradox and promise. Economists foresee a nation holding over 1,200 tons of official gold by mid 2030s. If even 5% of household holdings join formal monetization, the released capital could exceed $75 billion, enough to finance a year of infrastructure expansion. According to Niti Aayog's policy paper 2024, integration of gold into financial planning can stabilize savings and reduce dollar dependence. Imagine a day when part of the digital rupee is quietly backed by the metal that once crowned kings. The symbolism would be profound. The world's oldest civilization using its oldest wealth to secure its newest currency. Gold would cease to be merely ornament. It would become economic armor, shielding the rupee, strengthening trade, and uniting faith with finance. In the words of historian Romila Thapar, civilizations survive not by conquest but by continuity. Gold is that continuity, melting, remolding, yet eternal. from the Hiranyagarbha of the Vedas to the RBI sealed walls, from the bangles of brides to the reserves of BRICS, the story encircles back to its source. And as India steps into decades ahead, one truth gleams brighter than ever. The golden bird may have been plundered, pledged, and proscribed, but she was never broken. Her wings were gilded once again, ready to rise. And so, from the dust of Harappa's workshops to the digital vaults of Mumbai and Singapore, the journey of gold and India comes full circle. Through ages of splendor and sorrow, the metal has remained constant, silent, incorruptible, eternal. It has seen kings rise and empires crumble. It has crossed oceans and deserts, hidden in caravans and temples, placed in crisis and reborn in prosperity. According to ancient Sanskrit hymns, gold is the light of the sun on earth. Hiranya, the seed of creation itself. To the historian, it is economy. To the believer, it is divinity. And to the common Indian, it is security, dignity, and faith made solid. When the British drained our treasures, gold became the symbol of resistance. When the nation pledged its reserves in 1991, it became the spark of rebirth. When the Reserve Bank repatriated its bullion, it became the proof of regained sovereignty. And as the world today diversifies away from fragile paper and fleeting currencies, gold stands again, not as relic, but as revelation. India's story is not just written in ink or carved in stone, it is forged in gold. The bracelets of Harappan queens, the Gupta dinaras, the mohurs of Akbar, the coins pledged in London, all melt into one shining truth. India's wealth has never been mere metal. It has always been the moral wealth of perseverance. So, as the tale ends, remember every gram of gold in India carries the memory of ancestors who endured, dreamed, and rebuilt. The flame that once gleamed on the temple towers now glows in the heart of a billion people. It tells the world that the golden bird has not vanished, she has only risen higher. And with that, this is Rig History Extended, thanking you for walking beside us through centuries of light and shadow, through the saga of gold and India, where faith became fortune and history became eternity. Thank you for your love and patience. Until we meet again, Namaskar.